Yes.
Got it.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Well, everyone who's watching this, I'm here with my friend Rhiannon, who I last spoke to somewhere in the middle of 2020 when I was doing a different set of I don't know, interviews, but kind of just chats with people. And we decided we'd come back and do another one and talk about a wide variety of things, probably, but also about how to express yourself in the world, and some of the difficulties with that and some of the wonderful things about that. We were just talking about, how challenging it is to be an online practitioner while people are very used to coming into an office and laying on a table and being touched. And then with COVID, a lot of us had to go, or most of us, I would say, had to go to an online style of practice. And people were not used to that. And a lot of people weren't sure it would be effective. And I have people even now who I see for hypnotherapy, which literally can be done very easily virtually. They insist that it's a different experience to come in and lay in my recliner. Even though it really isn't, but to me it isn't, but they have some different kind of experience. So yeah, it's been a journey for both of us over the last year and a half, trying to figure out how to make this work, right?
Absolutely. Like it's, and it is one of those things, and like it has been such an interesting thing to experience that split almost, where like, because I've had the same kind of thing, like where clients are like, oh, this actually was effective, but I would still prefer to come see you, and I don't want to do this again like online. And it's just kind of like, all right, I get it, I can see that. And for me, I also feel a difference. Like it is a difference in it's like a textural difference almost. And I the thing that it's making me think of the difference in experience is almost like when you eat a food and you don't like it, not because you don't like the taste, but because you don't like the texture.
Yeah.
And so like
sure.
if you can put that same flavor in a different texture, like it becomes so much more palatable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think that might be a thing that we experience when we try and translate what is traditionally thought of as like somatic hands-on work, or even just, where you are used to being in the physical presence of your practitioner. It's yeah, I think it's that textural difference that people are like, "Muh." And maybe that even has something to do with what we were talking about before, that concept of a digital body.
Yeah.
Like how it gets filtered, because it's not, there is another whole entity, almost like the internet entity that consists of all of these other like streams off, and all of these other kinds of distractions, and how our brains process things that we look at on a screen versus, reading a book on a Kindle versus reading a book. Like,
Sure. Yeah. Paper. Yep.
yeah. So that was a ramble, and I don't really know
Yeah. No.
how to come back, but
No, but I like, before we started recording, we were talking about how, because we are all beating online now, we have this sort of a digital body or digital identity that we've created. And it's interesting because there's lots of people that I work with that I've never met in person. And their overall awareness of who I am as a person is informed by so much. Every Facebook post that I've ever made, potentially, if they're scrolling, and some people do and some people don't care. But when I got on Facebook in like 2009, my digital identity was very different than my digital identity now, or my, online ego or whatever. And so they have access to, people have access to my Instagram, people have access to my Facebook, people can read blog posts that I've read. I have 2 different websites that all contain who I am in the digital space.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
if you're meeting someone in your office, maybe they don't know anything about you except maybe your website.
Yeah.
They don't know how you're thinking, feeling. It's funny because it's almost more vulnerable and personal than people who just come into my office and they've like maybe even never seen my website. They just, somebody gave them my text number and they've texted me and maybe they've never interacted with anything I've ever written.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it may be a little impersonal because of the distance, but also more personal in a way too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like what you were saying, it's almost like, and like, especially in that therapeutic space, how interesting is that, where, you know, they tell, like in school and stuff, they tell us about, like, you know, you're not supposed to share your personal stuff, and like, and how we're supposed to be blank slates, and how, like, it's funny to watch how we are that anyway, because people will project onto you, like, especially as you're like their healer or whatever, however they're thinking of it, whatever it is, they're going to project anyway.
Sure.
But then how interesting to think of, like what you were saying, like they have access to versions of you and versions of us and versions of anyone else that we might not even remember we were. So now they're projecting like their present self onto our past self as if it were also our present self.
Right.
And it's like, how very strange to like have elements of us concretized in such a way that is accessible, that we've probably forgotten about, but meaningful to some other people still.
True. Yeah, I have a few clients who will kind of scroll through my Facebook and they're just liking things from even 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh wow, that's, and at first I'm like, why are they doing that? And then I'm like, oh no, it's interesting actually, because it gives me the opportunity to look back 5 years ago. What was I thinking and feeling back then? Who was I as a, you know, an online personality then?
Yeah.
How comfortable was I revealing myself? And I haven't really gone back and scrubbed my Facebook, for instance, or deleted anything. Like everything that I've ever been, including this really cringy complaining mommy posts that I used to make when I first got on Facebook of like, my daughter won't nap. And like anyone in the world needed to know that. Right.
Yeah.
I've just left it all there, you know, my wedding photos from my past marriage, and it's just all on there because that's who I am.
Yeah.
Fine. I don't really care if anybody knows.
Yeah. It's so strange because I'm the opposite. I've deleted my Facebook twice.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't even remember all the things that have happened and things that I've forgotten, and just realizing like what an interesting mirror that is for like how I experience myself in real life. Like I've got some pretty long stretches of fairly dense amnesia that rolls through my life.
Yeah.
And like if I sit with it long enough, I can pull stuff out of the ether, just like I'm sure if I were to hound Facebook for long enough, they would dredge up my old accounts for me.
Yeah.
I can be pretty annoyingly persistent when it used to be.
Right.
But
yeah, but to what end though?
Yeah.
Does it matter?
And yeah, it wouldn't really matter. So
yeah, maybe
but,
not. It's like how long do you hold on to the journals? Forever?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you throw them out? Recycle them?
Yeah, don't need to do that. That just becomes self-defeating at a point, because I think we can also talk ourselves into an idea that we are still the person that we were if we try and sit with those things long enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think a lot of people do that, especially in work like ours. Like,
Yeah.
They've attached to their pain or their trauma or their whatever it is for so long that they just,
Mhm.
they don't know how to tell that story differently. And I think that's another cool aspect of our work is that we help to rewrite that. But,
Yeah.
then how we do that, as an external entity, digital or otherwise, is still kind of like, that's tenuous.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally see the argument for either completely erasing the
Mhm.
old identities that you've made because you're in a new space and like, what's the point of holding on?
Yeah.
And also just letting it be and making the allowing for the whole story to just be there.
Yeah.
I think both are, really reasonable. I know lots of people who stop posting on Facebook, just don't care about it anymore, aren't interested in sharing every moment of their lives or every thought that comes out of their heads. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's healthy too.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that's been a question that's been popping up for me quite a lot, as because we were also talking about, again, I'm feeling a very strong call to write.
Mm,
But then there's like, okay, well, to what end? Because I want to write, but do I want to write this to share it? And if so, why do I want to share it? Is it just like, an aspect of me putting me out there, or do I like, or am I writing for other people? Which I went through a pretty solid stretch where I was definitely writing for other people, and come to realize it's not what I want to be doing. Um, and in part because I've really realized that I I'm just going to say it as it's going to come out, but like, I don't care about changing the world. Like, I really, really, like, on a very visceral level, I don't think anything needs to be changed. Like, I recognize there are not wonderful things that happen, but yet that's not my business. and
yeah.
and there's also like this space of that I'm not actually interested in even changing anybody else,
Hmm.
because also not my business. That's
Yeah.
their business, which makes it, with the profession that I'm in, and even like the purpose of writing and creating anything, where it's literally becoming art for art's sake, or therapy for therapy's sake, or love for love's sake. And it's just kind of like, all right, that's great and I like it, but now we have another existential crisis where, how do I charge for any of these things
I know.
and still exist in the world? Because I like to eat, and I
Right.
like shelter, and I like creature comforts, and so I have to work and put
Sure.
stuff out there and produce to
Sure.
have income. But it's like, all right, now what feels appropriate? Because it's like, now we get really into that ambiguity of pricing, almost, where it's just kind of like,
What is
charge
this
what
worth
you're worth.
anyway? I don't
Yeah,
know.
what?
Kind of
I don't
random and
know.
arbitrary,
Yeah,
right?
it's like, it's worth everything, but it's worth nothing
Yeah.
all at the same
Yeah.
time. And so, like, all right, wonderful, now how do you market that?
Totally. Well, I mean, I can tell you about, my writing and how that evolved and
Yeah.
the perceived reasons that I had for it.
Hmm.
When I started, well, going back like 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the
Hmm.
writing that I did was uh, my own process, sharing my own process, and excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Nope. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Awesome. Um, it was sharing my own process and also sharing things that I had picked up along the way. And also, would you totally like to be my client because I need to
Hmm.
make money? So, that's most of what I was doing. Sometime between 2018 and 2019, I started to write poetry. And when I was writing the poetry, I thought it was really, at first I thought it was really weird and I was really uncomfortable with it. And I didn't want to be uncomfortable with it. I wanted to just see it like you were talking about art, like art for art's sake. And can I be courageous enough to share something that other people won't understand, perhaps, and share it anyway? So for about a year, I just shared those poems because I was doing my own work on courage and being willing to be transparent and let people see the pain that I was in, let people see the joy that I was in. Not trying to influence anyone, just trying to be who I am.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like it morphed into the poems that were coming were something that I didn't have to work to share, but I just felt like I must share it. Not from a place of like the world is going to end if I don't share this, but more from a place of like why would you make art and then never let anyone see it? Like it's why would you hide something that's just a beautiful, cool thing? Just show it without no reason or logic necessarily. And so I think that's how I started to post things after that kind of realization that this is just something that's coming out of me that I think is beautiful and I just want to share it. Sometimes it has a predictable outcome where people love it or don't love it. It usually doesn't give me any clients or anything. It's not kind of focused on that. So yeah, it kind of evolved. And then I had a number of people say, I wish you would put your poems in a book so I could carry them around rather than scrolling through your Facebook feed for them.
Yeah.
And so I just took all the poems I had ever written and put them into a Google Doc and said, okay, which one of these feels like it's useful or beautiful or it has some need to be in a print form.
Yeah.
And I just amassed a whole bunch of them. And in the process of doing that, I found that there were certain poems that met a need inside of me as a woman. And those I separated out into the book that I made for my daughter. That's just for women. Well, just for it's literally, I wrote it for her and other people might enjoy it, but it's for her.
Yeah.
Like, those silly diaries that you give your mom to like fill out the life story, kind of like that, but in poem form. So that book actually had a lot more of a purpose to it. The other book was just like people were asking, so I did it.
Yeah.
So, and the process, I say the process was easy. I mean, the actual technical process of printing the book, the working through everything that you are talking about with the, why am I doing this? And how would I price it? And what's the point? And does anyone give a shit? All of that took me a year and a half to kind of sit with and try to understand, is this for my ego? And if it is for my ego, is that okay? All of that
matters. What if these questions actually matter?
Well, yeah, any of them matter? Maybe not. I don't know. But I still had to go through the process of sitting with the questions and then the actual publishing was so easy. I found a company that made the book covers and they formatted the inside. I sent them all the poetry, like I had to edit it all and get it all ready. I sent it all to them. They put it in a thing. I went on Amazon's Kindle digital publishing, KDP, they call it, website, uploaded it all. People can just order it and print it off Amazon. I make like $2 on every book. I mean, it's like nothing. But it's not like I went into it thinking this is my money making thing. I'm going to become a rich, J.K. Rowling person. No, I just wanted to print this stuff out. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's definitely, I just read, have you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
I bought that book when I was beginning to write this poetry book, but I only read like, I don't know, a quarter of it or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had heard of it. I thought about it, and then I let it go. And then Megan had brought it up again. We were talking about something, I don't remember
Yeah.
what. Um, but so I decided to revisit it, and I just finished it. But I really liked how she was talking about, um, not putting pressure on your creativity to provide for you like that.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's just kind of like that, it goes really well with a lot of things I've been thinking about love, which is another thing that I have to struggle with in myself, because I've had to accept that I am much more tapped into the collective and what's on like a large portion of people, or at least a large portion of people in my vicinity's minds, than for whatever reason I would like to be.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
I'm like, for like the last year or so, I've really been thinking about love and what that means and what I want from that space. And what I've recently come to realize in that is that that is another thing where it's love for love's sake. When we love is all there is, but it isn't enough, because if love is going to be a framework for itself, we're asking it to work. And that's when things go wonky. And so it's kind of the same with creativity. Like, when we're asking it to be anything other than itself, like be a producing force so we can create income or whatever it is, it's like it puts all the pressure on it, and twists things so it's no longer what it is, and then we have problems.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember I used to love to bake
Mhm.
back in my 20s and 30s. I mean, I'd probably bake every day, different things. I wanted to try every recipe. And people were like, you should open a bakery. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like the easy, fast way for me to hate baking,
Yeah.
is to have to churn it out in like a commercial style process.
Yeah.
Like I much prefer to make one recipe a night and bring it into my coworkers
Yeah.
than to
Make it
bastardize it in some way, you know?
make it, and now I have to do this, not
Right.
because I
Like
love
I'm
it, and
locked
not because
into this.
yeah, it's no longer a compulsion, it's a need.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
survive.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's interesting. Huh. This is a cool conversation.
Yeah. I like it too.
I think also, maybe you've had this experience too, but in a lot of spiritual circles, there's this
Mhm.
message that when you find your calling, like instantly the wealth just comes. You manifest all the things that you ever dreamed about. And I had that belief too, or magical thinking. I was like, yes, great. I'm gonna do this and
Yeah.
it will come.
Yeah.
But I think what I've actually observed over with all the people that are online that are teachers and authors, and the pattern I've actually seen to be true is that people begin to share themselves and it takes years
Yeah.
for people to build up um a, I hate to say this word, a platform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean though? Like
An audience,
an
people who are going to buy
audience,
from them, whatever.
people,
Like,
people more than like your 40 friends that always like your stuff. Right
yes.
now I'm definitely I have like a really lovely group of 40 people who love everything that I am teaching and doing. And thank God for those 40 people.
Yeah.
You guys are the beginner, like the beginning supporters. But
Yeah.
at some point, with enough just diligence and continual commitment to it, and coming from the right space and in the right energy, you just see the fruits of that. And
Mhm.
it's not it just continues to flow. It's not like a magical thing.
Yeah.
It just builds upon itself. And I've seen that in
Yeah.
so many of the people that I mean, there's people that I really respect what they're saying. And they have been doing this for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And now they're well known because they have 20, 30 years of practice teaching, and they've tried all different kinds of fun things and ways to reach people. And
Yeah.
there are the Instagram influencers, of course, like the holistic psychologists who blew up in a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are always those people, but
yeah, no, and I've seen a lot of people like that who, like, I actually have a few teachers that I've followed and that I've even studied under, and things where, you know, they were like, yep, I made $1 million in 7 months and I had never done anything like this before, and all of that. And I think that that does work sometimes,
sure.
because obviously it does, because there are people that
Yeah.
have done it. Uh,
Yeah.
like to like what you're talking about, like within the spiritual circles, like I've actually started to get like really fun, like chuckly ha-has out of like the meme spirituality that I think ties so well with that, because
Yeah.
so much of the time, what I've observed at least, is that people love these snippets, but they don't actually want to think about what they mean.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it's just kind of like, no, there's layers to it, because like, and especially with what you're referencing to the, like, if you just find what you love, like, you know, you'll have everything you ever wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that what people are missing underneath that is, because what most of the time what people are talking about is that you'll have the happiness, but we conflate that with the things.
Yeah.
And a thing that I've been playing with, and again, that letting it be for itself, is that the state of eudaimonia that we're all looking for, but that state is a state in perpetual motion, and it's the state of doing the thing because you love the thing. And
Mhm.
that's the only thing that matters, and that's why you have everything that you'll have ever wanted when you find the thing, because
Right.
nothing else then matters,
Yes.
you know.
Right.
And for some people, like, money is that thing that matters, like the making the money is that eudaimonia thing, like they just love playing with those numbers. But
Mm.
you know, for other people, that isn't that. And I think a lot of us haven't really sat with, what is the thing that
Mm.
we live and die and breathe for? What is that thing that we're so devoted to that it doesn't matter if it's making us money or not? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if anybody else understands it. It doesn't, we do it because of itself. We do
Right.
it for its own sake. We do it because it is us. And that's it's an expression of us. And like the last time I felt that was when I was building my original, the original form of my practice. And like, it's so funny because I have this really really like inconvenient thing where I can't always see where I'm at or why I love what I love in the moment. And
Sure. Yeah.
like, I have to like get past it and be able to look back at it. And so now that I'm no longer in that state of building, and I've realized that my everything is longing for something else to cultivate that devotion around. Like, I have to look at my financial world and my business world and go, okay, so how do I reorient this so this supports that thing that I'm
Mhm.
actually devoted to now? Because
Mhm.
that this thing here is no longer it. I no
Right.
longer, I am no longer like unconditionally devoted to this thing.
Yeah. It's changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you not go broke in the process, right? Like
Yes.
constantly rebuilding as we evolve and want new things for ourselves and for the people around us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
And also be sitting in the energy that you were talking about of like, I don't need anybody to be different and I don't need to be
Yeah.
different and nothing actually has to be done.
Yeah. There is
It's
nothing to be done.
paradoxical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, great. All right. Now that you know that that's my platform, you gonna pay me? So
Right.
are you going to pay me to stay exactly the same potentially?
Right. Yes. Yes. It's so funny, huh? Like
Yeah.
the more healing that you do, the less attached you are to other people doing their healing. And yet
Yeah.
you're still working in a healing world
Yeah. And it's just like, this is an odd space.
and knowing that other people don't actually need anything.
Yeah.
I think where I've settled with that is there's nothing wrong with anyone that I work with.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't see themselves clearly and they need support to see themselves for who they really are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm only really working with the perception.
Oh yeah.
Everything else is
Yeah.
an illusion.
No, it's I hear that and I feel that. And then there becomes the challenge of, again, how do you express that to other people in a way that's appealing? Because for most people, they're not in that place where
Right.
they're like, where they're like, I remember when I first started saying that, like, you're not broken. You can't break a human. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
People got so angry.
Really?
Yeah,
I am invested in being broken. Well,
yeah.
those are not your people, I don't think.
They are not my people. But it was like, it was just so fascinating because I was like, wow, like, wow, why is that such an awful thing to hear that you are not broken? Like, why is it so much more appealing for you to feel and perceive yourself as broken than it is to look at yourself as a different
Mm,
type of whole? And
right.
it's kind of like, I thought that was one of the most fascinating things. And I think that definitely was like, well, yep, I may never make money again.
Yeah, I hear you. In my experience, people want to be broken
Mhm.
because sitting in the reality of where they're at in life or their body or whatever, it's easier to think something can be fixed than to just
Mhm.
accept what's happened and where you are
Yeah,
and sit with it.
yeah,
It just gives you something to do.
yeah, yeah. And from that perspective, I can really relate to it. I have a lot of trouble sitting in the space where I am at, where there really is nothing for me to do. Like,
Yeah.
I have a few things that I'm working on in terms of marketing and just like learning to be learning how to again express my message in a way that's also appealing to people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, it's the practice of what we were talking about before, expressing who I am. It's not a matter of doing anything, it's just a matter of being and then being seen. and
Right.
and it's like, it's so, I'm finding it very interesting how uncomfortable that is for me, because I'm like, I'm used to it being like, when I was building my business, it was something that was an external goal. There was
Mhm.
a set end point. There was a set, like, this is what this will look like. This is what I'm building towards. And here are the steps that I need to do to get there.
Right.
And now with like my new focus, there's a lot of, I'm devoted to this, but there's not much for me to do. And so I don't
Mm.
really know how to then practice a devotion when there's nothing to do other than just be here. And I'm like,
Right.
okay. And that then goes back to, okay, is that enough? And then in business wise, okay, is that enough to charge for? And
Yeah.
all those different permutations of like, okay, if I have come to the realization that I am love without reason. Ooh,
Mm.
that's still weird to say out loud. But
Yeah.
that's the core, and that's what I'm learning to express and just be. which is also a very strange thing because it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like anything. There's no charge to it. It just is an existence.
Yeah.
And so like, but you know, if yeah, I'm see, even trying to express it now, I'm
It's hard
like,
to put
what?
words to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay. And then even around that, because I promised myself I would never sell myself, because that's the thing that creates all sort of warped and wonky, but I'm offering the space that myself creates. And so how do you, what do you do with that? And how do you use words to describe that feeling and make that appealing to someone who's like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. All I know is that I feel like I need fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know very much. And I'm kind of in a similar exploration
Yeah.
now where I have been so used to being online with my digital body or whatever,
Yeah.
just existing. And I like sharing these things and I want nothing from anyone. Like,
Yeah.
if you like it, great. If you don't like it, awesome. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing I have swung maybe a little too far to the left with that,
Mhm.
in that there's nothing for anyone to engage with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my reason, really, I guess it's kind of a made up reason, to be honest, because everything is eventually a made up reason.
Yes.
But my made up reason that I'm devoted to and passionate about is building community where people can talk about stuff together that's maybe hard to understand, or there isn't a community that you resonate with.
Yeah.
But if I don't talk about, hey, by the way, I'm building this cool community you can be a part of, and I just keep sharing, pointless. I don't mean it in a negative way, but like
No,
pointless.
I understand. There is no point to this. This just is. Enjoy the
Yeah.
is. So,
If I keep sharing these pointless posts that don't say, come join my community, I want to talk with you and be with you, then
there's no
nobody will join it. So
Yeah.
I'm working on that.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
not great at marketing. Like, marketing for me is bizarre because I don't know how to talk about myself anymore. No
Well, and
idea.
then and like that's the thing that I think, like in that particular point, like I've swung so weirdly around because my marketing actually plummeted when I started talking more about me and myself, because that's not the point. And it's like, but it comes back to now that space where I've always had trouble, which is talking to like your client avatar. And I'm like, my client avatar could literally be anybody because it doesn't actually matter.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, how do I talk to an amorphous blob?
Right. All of
And
that marketing stuff about your ideal client, I'm like, who the fuck would that
what does
be? I
I
don't know.
know.
It's
I'm like,
anyone.
yeah. I'm like, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, I know if somebody comes to me and I'm like, yeah, I can help you. I can help you get to where
Right.
you think you need to go or not. But I don't know who that person is. And
Yeah.
to express that and then to talk directly to them or to speak from their perspective, I'm like, and especially like now being in this space where like, you're extracted from victim consciousness where, you don't need to save anybody, no one needs to be saved. And so it's like that pain point marketing is complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And what's probably even harder though is that because so many people are still sitting in survival space and feeling like they need to move into that, or if they're not in survival but they're in some version of thrive, that all marketing is still talking about there needs to be a goal and an
Right.
end and a something out there, and an A to B. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but what if A and B are the same place? Like, how do we,
Right.
how do
Right.
yeah. Like, what if What if it's just like literally turning someone's world upside down so they can see something different? And I have found that for the majority of people, they don't find that appealing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, so
Yeah, they
it's
take
like,
a little longer.
yeah,
Usually people will come around, but it takes a long time, maybe, and maybe longer than you personally may want to invest.
yeah, yeah. It's like
That happens. Mhm.
it does. And then, because I think the other part of marketing is they talk about like, well, think about how you buy things. And I'm like, how I buy things is not how other people buy things.
Right.
I'm like, yep, that feels good. That makes all sorts of sense. Not gonna do that. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Right.
and then sometimes it's completely opposite. And I'm like, I have no idea why I buy things. I just do. So
Yeah. Well, intuitive buyers like you and I,
yeah.
you can't really market to them. You can only do like a make sure that the general energy feels good,
Yeah.
and then people
Yeah.
will buy or not. So
Yeah.
I kind of try for that, like on my website and the couple websites that I have. One of them has a little bit of a feeling right to a certain population of people, and the other one has a
Yeah.
overall feeling good to a different population. And
Yeah.
where people end up, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Depends. I can't believe it, but I have to go.
Oh
I should have kept you in the time spot we had so we could keep talking.
no.
And now I'm sad. That's
Well,
okay.
I would be happy to schedule another time if we want to continue this at some point,
Yes,
because
that
this
makes
is,
sense.
yeah.
We could talk a little bit more about the weirdness of egoless marketing or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. The weirdness of ineffable marketing
Yeah.
and just like what what does marketing become when you're not talking to anyone, but you're talking to someone very specific at the same time?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much for your time today. That was fun.
It was. Thank you. I'm glad that we got to do this, and
Me too.
might have taken me a couple of months to figure out what we wanted to talk about, but
We probably talk about anything. That's the funny thing. We have a
yeah,
lot in common, I think. So,
we do. So I would like to do this again at
yeah,
some
me
point.
too. Okay, let's brainstorm and then we'll circle back for part two.
Yes. Okay. Lovely.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.